joining us today, and Melissa Simon as well. But so if you don't mind, Kacie, sharing a little bit about that work, we're looking forward. Some of us have visited the exhibit, some of us are going to visit the exhibit, and I have the idea that we will have conversations related to this for a long, long time. So maybe in the future we'll meet at the exhibit and maybe see you, although I know that it has a limited time. I know it's coming to an end in December. But I know that we'll have more conversations related to the work, that amazing impact and work that you're doing at the university, but also in our community. Thank you. Kacie?
Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about myself and give you kind of an overview of the project. And then I figured we can just kind of chat and I can answer any kind of questions about the project or about the work or about the exhibit. And if you haven't seen the exhibit, that's totally fine. You should see it, but if you won't need to have seen it to understand what I'm talking about today, for the most part. So yes, my name is Kacie Lucchini Butcher. I'm the director of UW-Madison's Public History Project. I'm originally from La Crosse, Wisconsin, so I'm a Wisconsin girl through and through. I unfortunately did not go to college in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, that's like very contentious when I present at the Alumni Association. But I went to Augsburg University. It was Augsburg College then in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it was great and I loved it. And I got my graduate degree in public history from the University of Minnesota. So that's where the contention comes in, but I swear I'm a Wisconsin girl through and through. The reason that I'm here, it was so funny. People ask like, how did you end up here? How did you direct this big project? When I was in Minneapolis, I worked on an exhibit called Owning Up: Racism and Housing in Minneapolis. And it was very, very well received. It was my first exhibit that I really got to work on and kind of cut my teeth on. And, in that process of curating that exhibit, I just had this kind of profound moment of realizing that I think history, and particularly history that is told well and in an engaging way, and that really isn't kind of shameful, but that is more geared at getting people to ask questions and to reflect on their cities or their communities or the place where they are, can really help conversations that are difficult. And so Minneapolis at the time, as Madison is continuing to talk about as well, had a serious issue with housing. There was housing insecurity, there's housing shortages. And so for the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, this was in 2018, 2019, we did this exhibit called Owning Up. And that experience of kind of working with community, having these conversations and discussions, I realized really that power in public history. And I saw this job posted and I wasn't going to apply. I had an advisor who was like, you should let them tell you no. The classic great job application advice is you should apply and let them tell you no. And so I did apply and got through the whole process. And by the time that I got to my job talk campus visit, I left and I was like, if I don't get this job, I think I'll be devastated. Like, I love it. I really want to do this work. I think I'm the right person to do this work. And they called me and they offered me the job. So I've been here since August of 2019. And people ask me like, what's your dream job? And I'm like, this is definitely one of them. I think I'm a very, very lucky person who gets to do something really cool. So the Public History Project, which is what I direct, is really this like sweeping initiative at the university. But I'll give you kind of the high notes. Many of you probably have heard whispers about its founding. So the founding of the Public History Project, we started in August of 2019, but our origins come out of a report on two student organizations in the 1920s that bore the name of the Ku Klux Klan on campus. So that report is available online. It's about 30 to 35 pages. Once I'm done talking, I can find the link and drop it for you if you want to read it. And in that report, is a lot of history about these two student organizations. There's also 3 recommendations. And one of the recommendations is a question. And the question is, by focusing so closely on our history of these two student organizations in the 1920s, what are all of the other histories of discrimination that we're missing on campus? But also, what are the histories of resistance that we're missing on campus, right? When you have such a narrow research question, you inevitably miss a lot of things. And so that question really formed the Public History Project, and our mandate is very broad. Our mandate is to uncover and give voice to histories of exclusion on campus through the voices of those who experienced and resisted it. So there are 2 things I think that make this project entirely unique in the country in higher education. And I would argue also internationally. No one else is doing this work the way that we are doing this work. So the first thing is the scope of our project. Many universities have looked at their institutional histories. So for example, you might have heard of Harvard or UVA or Georgetown. They've all looked at their histories related to slavery. But again, that's a really specific research question, right? It's very rooted in one time. It has kind of limits on it. And that allows these universities to really just look at one thing, and then they don't have to look at some of the other histories, right? Particularly ones that are closer to present, or that might have, relations to donors, things like that. We took a very intentional scope here of trying to look at as much as we could. I don't want to say everything because if that's impossible to look at everything, but we set out to look at racial and ethnic discrimination, but also discrimination against LGBTQ folks, folks with disabilities, religious discrimination, gender discrimination. We really thought that to do this well, we had to look at everything in some way. And what we really wanted was for people to be able to come through, and even if it was just one story, we wanted someone to be able to see their community, to see a story about someone who looked like them or someone whose experience was like theirs. And so I often tell people we're a mile wide, not a mile deep, but I think it's really special that we get to do that. And we've gotten great feedback about how people really like the kind of mixture and diversity of experiences. The second thing that makes the project unique is our public history focus. So lots of people, including, my family at the Thanksgiving dinner table, they're like, what is public history? What do you do for work? Is this a real job? It is a real job. But, I tell everyone, I tell my students, you have all interacted with public history before. You just might not have known it was called that. So if you've ever been to a history museum, that's public history. But if you've ever, stopped at a roadside marker on a road trip, that's public history. If you've ever been to a national park, the national parks are full of public historians. Lots of movies that have historical basis to them have public historians on staff who make sure that things are going well, that they're accurate. Podcasts, walking tours, digital humanities projects, lots of them have public historians. So we do a lot of things, but our main goal is to make history accessible for the public. So most of the institutions I mentioned earlier, UVA, Georgetown, Harvard, they chose to do academic things with their research. So they put out books or journal articles or reports. And while these are great and they serve a function, people don't read them, just to be quite frank. They're 100 pages, 130 pages. They're dense. They're very academic. I do a little thing around campus and I'm like, would you read it? If I handed you a 100-page report on the history of UW-Madison, would you read it? And there's always like one nerd in the room who's like, I would read it. And the students, faculty, staff, I'm telling you, everybody is like, no, I'm just not going to read it. And I think that that's fair, right? We live in a busy world. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of things vying for our attention, and 100 and 130 pages of academic research, that's a tough sell. So we focused really, and I think this was important when they were formulating the project, why are we doing this? Are we doing this because we want academic research? Or are we doing this because we want to have conversations and discussions? And they lean towards that side. Like, we are doing this work because we think it could get us somewhere different. We want to talk about it. And that's where the public history focus comes in. All of the products, all of the work that we do is really focused on getting this history out into the community and having discussions about it. So obviously our biggest, flashiest thing is the exhibition at the Chazen. It opens September 12th and it runs through December 23rd. If you haven't seen it yet, you have to go. I tell everybody it's a very different experience to be in the gallery. There's lots of photos, never before put on display archival memorabilia. We digitize photographs that have never been digitized before. So it really is a different history about UW. And there's just, I think, some really difficult stories in there, and also things to just be so proud of, and things that really will, I think, inspire people. And so far the response we've gotten has been incredible, which I can talk about more. But if you don't have a chance to see it before December 23rd, or if you realize on January 21st, you want to re-explore it, everything in the gallery is replicated online. So we have a full digital exhibit website. It's reckoning.wisc.edu. I'm bad at multitasking, so I'm not going to drop it in the chat right now, but I can. So it's reckoning.wisc.edu. So it has everything in the gallery plus more. So we couldn't fit all the stories we wanted to tell in the gallery, so we put that online. It also has over 300 what we call digital assets, but archival material. So we digitize things that hadn't been digitized before: letters, newspaper articles, photos, videos, oral histories, to really give people a chance to like use the website, not only as a way to learn about the history, but as a research resource. So it has all this great archival material. It has our full footnotes. We have over 400 footnotes. It also has links to our blog. So we've been putting out blogs for about 3 years now. So I tell people the website, you can go as deep as you want to go. So if you go and, you just want to read 100 words about a history, that's there. But if you want to see archival images, that's there. If you want to read our long form blog posts about that history, that's all there. So you can really go as deep as you want to go. So we have the website, which is great, and that will continue to live on past the December 23rd close date. We've done a pretty robust event and lecture series. We think it's important to be out there in the community, talking about the history, presenting on the history. We have an event tonight. We're talking about the history of eugenics in Wisconsin and about Van Heis's role in the eugenic movement in Wisconsin. So we do lots of things like that. We also do events, with the Alumni Association, but also out in the community to just try and get people to know what the project is, but to make those connections and to talk about history. We're also really excited. We're partnering with the Forward Theater Company for their new play that's coming up called Finding Beatrice. So if any of you are not going, you should go, but they're doing a little lecture series and they invited me to give a lecture before one of the showings next Saturday, not this upcoming Saturday, next Saturday. So that's really exciting too. We also have a full set of curricular materials. So we have 10 teaching guides. 9 of them are themed for the exhibits. Each one includes primary sources, secondary sources, discussion questions and protocols, and additional primary sources in case faculty don't like the first set. So we call them a la carte. Faculty can come in and take what they want. They can also take it all. It's very adaptable and flexible to faculty need. But I also tell regular people about it who are not teaching because there's great discussion questions in there. So if you want kind of like, hey, I really want to reflect on its history more, anybody can use these. Anybody can use them as a research resource or as questions. We also have one for the Go Big Read. So if you're reading Clint Smith's How the Word is Passed, we do have a discussion guide for that as well. We were really excited that Clint Smith was here. It was a fantastic partnership, and everything I've heard is that it's the most popular Go Big Read that we've had. It's being taught in the most classes. It had the most views online. So it's a very successful Go Big Read. So I recommend the book to everybody. And so those are the kind of main things. And then finally, remember how I was really rallying against reports? The university wants a report and they will be getting a report because it's my job to provide. So, I think that sometimes you just can't get away. Academia can't help itself, right? We have to have this report. So I was looking back and it says in there they want it to be a 10,000 word historical report. We're changing it. We've talked with the chancellor's office. We're going to make it a process report about what it was like to do this project because we are truly the first to do it. We could not call Michigan and say, what happened when you put your exhibit up? Because they haven't done an exhibit like this. We couldn't call Purdue and say, how did you build your communications plan? Because Purdue hasn't done this. And so it was very challenging. We learned a lot and we want to pass that on to other folks. And we get, I'm talking once a week to somebody from another university about historical issues on campus or how we did things. So it'll include really, important information like staffing and budgets, but also, some of the response and how we built a comms plan and how we found stakeholders, things like that. So I'm excited that it's adapted a little bit, and I think it'll actually be a very useful document. So that is all of the kind of components of the public history project. I say that as if that wasn't a huge thing, but it really is, I think, a kind of revolutionary project, and it's really bold. And former Chancellor Rebecca Blank is the one who commissioned it, and I think it's just kind of an incredibly bold thing to do. And so far, I can tell you the response has been overwhelmingly positive. We've gotten to have these incredible conversations with folks. We've gotten to see people connect to the history of the university and to Madison in a new way. And so I think it was not only a bold move, but one that paid off. I think it's going to pay dividends, not only for our campus community, but for the larger Madison community. So I'll leave it there. I'm happy to answer any kind of questions about, anything. I always tell people about the project, about the exhibit. I'll answer questions about me. I'm an open book. So I'm here to kind of chat with you all and talk.
Thank you, Kacie. I think that there's so many things, right? I saw it every step, right? I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the details in terms of like what you were planning, how things changed with COVID, and then what you kind of had to adapt. I wonder if you can share some of that. And also the second piece will be maybe something of how did you connect with community right away? What local community, right? I mean, what were the plans, and what was the initial feedback?
Yep. Yeah. So, we came in and the project was supposed to be 2.5 years. And I got here and I said, let's just make it 3. Like, what's the half for? Budgets, everything, let's just make it 3. So we did 3. And then COVID happened and we were locked out of the archives for 5 months, which, made our job incredibly hard. We utilized a lot of oral histories, and actually we did more oral histories during the pandemic than ever because everybody was bored and nobody had anything to do. So people were like, sure, I'll talk to you for 2 hours. Like, I have a lot of stories to tell. So it did work out in that way, but we got an extension. So now the project's 4 years total. So technically the public history project is set to end right now in July of 2023. There are conversations ongoing about what it looks like if we continue it and what that could become for campus. But at this point, it's set to end in July of 2023. But I'm hopeful that it'll continue because we have more work to do. I had a very unique graduate school education in public history, which was very much centered in nothing about us without us. You cannot do projects like this without community. It's not only impossible, like it's very structurally hard, but it's also just unethical to do them without the communities. And so my role, I think, as a public historian, I view my role as very much a service position. And I'm just here as like a person with experience in public history, but it's not about the histories I want to tell. It's not about the stories I want to tell or how I want to tell them. It's really about what our community needs and how I can do that for a community. Because I have this really unique position where I get to put up the exhibit about discrimination, right? I get to tell the stories. They're paying me to do that. So when I got here, I had meetings everywhere. Anybody who would meet with me, I met with them 30 minutes, 15 minutes, sometimes for hours. And I asked everybody the same 2 questions. So the first question I asked was, what stories should we tell? What histories do you know about that you think we can't miss? And most people mentioned things in the past 10 to 20 years, which is fascinating. And that's why you'll see in the exhibit, there's a lot of recent stuff that was very intentional because our community was clearly linking recent stuff to this past. Right. But also we felt it would have been disingenuous. Like people who've been around Madison, they know about these issues, right? So it would have been kind of weird not to mention them. The second question I asked them was, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, in an ideal world, how is UW-Madison different because we did this project, right? Why are we doing this? What are the goals that we have for this as a community? And lots of people talked about reckoning, which is why it ended up in the title. The word reckoning came up a lot. And I think it's a very complex word. It's a very hard word. And Clint Smith actually talked about reckoning because it's in the title of his book. And he said that what he likes about reckoning is that it's very individual and collective at the same time, that individuals can reckon and collectives can reckon together. And so I really, really liked that. I told him, I was like, I will be stealing that. I will be crediting you, but I will be taking that on the road. So, we wanted this project, I think, to be shaped in a way where it would do something. I really don't like the study of history just to learn facts about the past. I like to teach history and I like to show history in a way that gets people to reflect on what's going on right now and maybe about the decisions we'll make in the future and how we can change those. And community everywhere we went said the same thing. And we got mixed reaction from community, right? We go all around Madison, all around the campus community and say, this is what we're up to. And I was very cognizant of my positionality. I'm a young white lady from Wisconsin representing the university saying, hey, we're going to tell your history about racism, right? And a lot of people were like, why would I tell you anything? Why would I support this? This might be another rubber stamp thing from the university. We don't trust that the university has our best interests in mind, to which I always said, completely fair. You do not have to talk to me. You do not have to collaborate with our project. Everything you feel is justified and you're totally allowed to feel that. But if you'd like to work with us, if you'd like to talk to me, I'm here and I'll keep showing up, right? And that's what I did for years. I just showed up to meetings, to anything I was invited to. And I tried really to be clear about, as the director, as the thought leader of this project, this is how I approach these topics. This is my goal. This is how I think about these things, so that people knew that I was trying my best, that I was operating in good faith. But there are many people, like I was just joking at the opening with Dr. Reverend Alex G about, I went to him really early on, like first month, we had a meeting in his office. And he was like, I didn't trust you at all. I did not think you were going to do this project right. I didn't think you were going to tell the honest truth about this university. And now that I see the exhibit, I see that I was wrong. But like the fact that he didn't trust me for 3 years didn't offend me. I was like, that's completely understandable, but I'm happy now that he sees that we were trying to do it right. So I think that was kind of our approach. We've also, I talk a lot with folks about how to do community engagement, especially with students. And, there was lots of people who said, well, why haven't you partnered with this org? Or like, why isn't this org more involved? And we approached a lot of the kind of big name social justice, diversity focused organizations in town. And many of them straight said to us, this is not a part of our mission. We're really supportive. We're glad UW is doing this, but like, this isn't our focus right now, right? We're trying to feed people. We're trying to find them housing. We're very, very worried about COVID and in our community. So we just don't have time to engage with you right now, but best of luck. And so I often also talk about, like, as a public history project based in the campus community, our core community is campus. So we did a lot of campus community engagement, right? We worked extensively with student groups, with shared governance, with those kind of key players on campus and those key stakeholders on campus, because those are our community, right? And then whenever we kind of saw those really great partnerships with outside organizations that felt natural, that benefited both parties, that's another thing I always tell students, it has to benefit everybody, then we made those connections. Yes, community engagement. I'm sure Brenda and I could really just like get into it. But yeah, we tried really, really hard to connect with community. And I've always felt deeply uncomfortable with being the final line on anything. I don't like that. I don't want to be like the capital H historian that tells everybody what their history is. So even the writing of the exhibit was very collaborative. We worked with students to write it. We sent it to 10 public historians across the country and got their feedback. We sent it to 60 people across campus. So different leaders, faculty, students, staff got their feedback and changed the exhibit based on their feedback. And I tell people, I really do think that's actually why the exhibit hasn't gotten as much negative pushback, is because a lot of the negative pushback we got already. We got it in, January when we asked for it. So it's been kind of beta tested a lot. But I really like that element. I don't like working alone. I'm a very collaborative person.
That's perfect. Thank you, Kacie. Other questions? Ron, yes.
Kacie, thank you so much for being here. And the reason why I'm here tonight in Michael Muka is November 17th, we're going to bring a group of 30 Rotary Club of Madison people to the exhibit, and then we're going to go to the union and have a discussion.
Yes.
What I was curious about is, and I've been to the exhibit probably as many as 5 times. 3 or 4 times maybe where I was only there for 15 minutes, and then a couple days ago I was there for probably 45 minutes. I guess what I want you to comment on, this isn't criticism because you can't do everything, you can't be all things to all people. But what struck me was the idea that focuses on the university and the campus, but yet people who comprise the university and the campus are either Madisonians or people came from Kenosha, Rhinelander, Beloit, Caribou, wherever. And unfortunately, they brought their values to the university. And I guess I'd comment and say that some of those values were values that were reflective of their own hometowns, that were discriminatory values. And so the one thing I wondered about was, how do we take this and learn more about the ills of the people of Wisconsin, and until just recently, I think 75%, 66% students were Wisconsin residents. It's only been recently that we broadened that, allowing more people from out of state. So the injustices that were done primarily by people of Wisconsin who brought this kind of poor values, if I can use that expression, here to Madison with them. In addition to the fact that Madison, and of course, one of the things you focused on was the way in which renting a room or an apartment could be so difficult for people who are Black or Jewish or Latino.
Yeah.
Sorry, I rambled too much.
No, that was great. I wondered why I recognized your name, and it's because you're on our visit list. I was like, his name looks really familiar. So I'm excited to host you guys and have even more discussion. So some of this will be overlap. But yeah, I think it's a really good question. And you're right. I mean, the people ask a lot about the challenges, and I think there's some very natural challenges to the project, right? Like research, it was hard to find the stories that we always wanted to tell. But one of I think the things that we struggled with the most as like a project team was the curation, actually, was what stories do we tell? And we can't tell them all. And what are the points we want to make? And that was something that we actually talked about, is like, and we've said this in conversations too across campus, but, it's not surprising that there's racism on campus, because there's racism in our world. And so, we don't live in a utopia, that you don't cross into campus and then all of a sudden you're in utopia, right? And so how do we talk about where our students are coming from and how that affects the culture of the university, right? And where those ideas stem from. But it was one of those things that was just a complicated story to tell, and that we didn't get to do to the level that we wanted to. That being said, one of the ideas that I have for moving forward with the project, if the project continues, and something that I wanted to do, but we didn't get to do enough, was to make connections across the states. Because the histories that we often found were linked to other places in the state of Wisconsin, whether that be universities or just other communities. And so, one of the obvious examples is that our 1969 Black student strike was a direct response to the UW Oshkosh 1968 student strike. And so there's this really natural connection between the two that we didn't get to explore as deeply as we wanted to. So in an ideal world, I had this idea where we could make more connections to other places across the state to not only support history work, but to highlight history work. Like, almost imagine like a big map where you could really explore a lot of these issues and how they're linked, right? But of course, we were understaffed, and they were like, these are the things we need you to do. There has to be this exhibit. But that's one of the things I think you're absolutely right, is like making those broader connections, because our exhibit is so hyper focused. It is focused so closely on UW-Madison and on the Madison community that we miss a lot of those broader stories that I think help to make richer the history and to make those kinds of contextual connections that you need. But yeah, it's one of those things that like, I hope we get to do in the future, and I hope we get to expand on, because it's such an interesting piece of the story.
You think that you may be taking this on the road and maybe going to places like Kenosha and Green Bay and La Crosse? You got to take it to La Crosse, your hometown.
We've been talking about that, actually, about how we could travel with pieces of it and what stories. And there's actually a story that has a La Crosse connection. George Pogue, who was the first African-American man to get an Olympic medal, to win an Olympic medal, is from La Crosse, Wisconsin. And there's a park named after him in Wisconsin now. So yes, there are connections all across the state like that. And we have been having conversations about doing that, because I think that would be great.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jason.
Oh, thank you. First of all, go Augies. As a Metropolitan, I did not go there, but I worked for a very famous alumni, Martin Sabo, who did go there. So.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes, I know the Sabos.
Go Augies, go Augies. Minneapolis pride. What I was struck by at this exhibit, I've been there multiple times, I've seen you there multiple times, was the oral history part of it, right? When you walk in, I wasn't struck by the fact that there's racism by a quote in 2021, but how much there was day quotes from direct now, and how much did that change because of COVID? And it sounds like you were able to maybe bring more of that oral history of what's happening in today to get information from 2021. From 2022, from 2019, to hear exactly what is happening today at the university.
Yeah, so, with the oral histories, we knew we were going to do those the whole time, because, there's just, the archive doesn't have everything you need. But also oral histories just deepen our understanding, right? Like, it's different to read about a protest in a newspaper and then to hear someone talk about what it was like to be there, and like what the sounds were like, and like I could smell tear gas in the air, right? It's a different experience. So we knew we wanted to do it. And we also knew that some of those individual experiences can only be documented through oral history, right? So like when you think about some of the quotes that you see about the experiences people have had in the dorms, or the microaggressions students have heard in the classroom, there's really no other way to document those, right? Like there might be stories about that in the Daily Cardinal, but they often don't dial down to that specificity. And so we knew we were going to do it the whole time. The prevalence of them being in the exhibit is actually a direct response to students. So students, when we met with them and talked to them, we would always ask them, like, what do you want us to talk about? You know, we can only tell so many stories. What are like the things that you want? What are the biggest issues you see on campus? And how can we make space to open up the conversation? That was actually something Clint Smith said that I found really thought-provoking from his talk. He said that, you know, historians and public historians aren't here to tell people what to believe. We're here to make space so people can ask questions that they haven't thought to ask before, and that people have space to reflect. And I was like, yes, that's like exactly what we tried to do. And students said, you know, there's so many documents, there's so many reports, there's so many studies that say students face microaggressions in the classroom. Students face racism in their dorms. And there's something very detached and depersonalized about it, and something very scientific about it that like almost takes the punch out of it, or people almost like it just washes over them. They're like, oh yeah, okay, that happens. Oh, that thing happened. But there's something about reading the quotes and having to really hear from students today or in the past few years about their experiences that just, it hits differently. It's a much more powerful impact. And so students said, we think that you should prioritize that. You know, this academic language of this stuff happens here doesn't pack the same punch that having to listen to us talk about it does. And so we really prioritized those first person quotes from oral histories and from the Color of Drinking study in 2017, which did a lot of interviews with students, because it just, I think it makes it more visceral and more real. And we really wanted to do that. And students, the reason we included so many bunched together is because students also said, you know, I would share this with someone. I'd say, you know, I faced this in the dorms, and someone would say, well, I'm sorry that happens to you, but that's an individual experience. You only faced that. And so we knew if we included multiple quotes, you couldn't say that as easily, that there was that power in numbers, that many people were sharing similar experiences around the same time. So it was very strategic. It wasn't a popular decision. It's one we've gotten, I think, a lot of critiques from leadership and from administrators, you know, because it is so close to the present, and because it's hard to read. It's uncomfortable to have to see that your students are facing these things, right? But it's a decision that I tell everybody, I tell students, I tell faculty and staff, every day we make choices. You know, we made the choices we thought were best at the time. And when it really came down to it, when we had tough choices to make, we as a curatorial team chose students. We made a decision a long time ago that the students were our priority, that we really wanted this to be good for them and to do things for them. And that, you know, if there were bonuses and perks for faculty and staff, great. If the admin liked it too, that's also good. But we had this rare opportunity to really give students a space to speak openly and honestly and share their experiences. So we did that. But I think it really does add that human element. And I tell people it kind of turned out to be a people's history of the university. It's very people-centric, which I also think is very powerful.
Well, thank you. And I went to Boston University with Howard Zinn and the team that wrote People's History. So that certainly speaks to me.
That's the reason I'm a historian. I did not like history in high school. And then in college, I got assigned a People's History of the United States. And I was like, this rocks. History is very cool.
So I know that we have Linda Vacunta next, but before there was another question that was sent to me. Sarah Esmond is asking, I'm curious about the story behind the project, since UW is replete with white supremacy racism. Who is interviewing Kacie about origin story and facilitators that matter to getting it aired? I think just to add a little bit of more background is that she's also saying, you know, I think it will be, and I think that we have had these conversations with many other groups, you know, potential to learn who made this possible and why, and how we can leverage the learning towards remedy the healing, this capture experiences in space. But since I haven't, you know, she hasn't been to the exhibit, how it directs viewer to roll with making change, right? So what is the impact of this as well?
Yeah, so we are doing oral histories of ourselves and our staff and our students, which is fun to get their experiences and to, this background stuff, right? That's like not on our website about the decisions that we made and how we did it and the challenges that we faced, so that will be documented for the future too. So we're going to actually do that in the spring, since the project will be over possibly, but also its first rendition will definitely be over, its first kind of life. So we are doing that and we're really excited. And I already know, like, Troy Reeves, who is going to probably be doing them, he was like, it's going to be hours. And I was like, I think it'll be hours. Like it's going to be a long time. A lot has happened since the start. As far as like change, and I also saw the question in the chat too of like how students are being cared for and heard differently as a result. One of the things I talk about often is, I will personally view this project as a failure if in 10, 20, 30 years, everything about UW is the same, right? I think we'll be facing a lot of these problems for a while, but my biggest goal and my hope was that the history could be used as a tool to inform better decision-making so that we're not seeing these same things in 10, 20, 30 years. I do think the history is a tool that we can use to change UW and make UW more equitable, to make it a better place. So the change, I think, happens on a few different levels. And we've already seen, I think the easiest level is individual behavior and interpersonal behavior. So we've had lots of students come through the exhibit and we've had lots of conversations with white students, and we've just heard promising things. We've heard white students say, like, I saw the quotes in the classroom section. I've definitely said things like that to my classmates. I'm going to think twice before I say things like that again and really think about what I'm trying to say and how it comes across. We met with White Greek Life and we had a very extensive conversation and presentation with them about their history. And like, there were light bulb moments in the room. Like, you could see students say, like, this stuff is still happening in our organizations. Like, we need to think differently about hosting parties with themes. We need to make sure that we're not repeating this history. Like, we don't want this to be our history or our story. So I think interpersonally, that's like the easiest one. And honestly, I tell everybody, the kids are all right. Like, the kids get it. We present this to students and they really get how the history affects actions on campus. There's the next level, which is like departments, units. And we've seen a lot of positive work with that. We have lots of departments and units who are reflecting on their own history. The one I talk about the most is we had this incredible partnership with the genetics department. They updated their website with a really full history of the history of eugenics in the department. And they approached us. They said, graduate students brought this up to us. We've done some research. We'd like to do more. Professor Nicole Nelson and myself gave a big presentation to them. We led them through a facilitated discussion. They updated their website. They're doing lots of reckoning work to think about how this history in their department continues to affect their departments today. And to think about how there are eugenic ideas that are still very much a part of the genetic field. And how do we make sure we're not doing some of those same harmful practices? So I've seen a lot of positives from departments and units as well, who are really grabbing a hold of their history and taking accountability. The hardest level is admin. I'll be honest with you. This big institution, right? It's a cruise ship. So you can't just turn left, right? It's a cruise ship. You gotta slowly maneuver. And we've had conversations with leaders across campus who say, I love the exhibit. I learned so much. What do I do though? Like, what do I do with it? What am I supposed to take away from it? How does it affect this policy? Or how should I let it shape this thing that we're working on? And my answer is never very satisfying to them, but the answer is we have to figure it out together. The history is not an instruction manual. It does not say you have to do A, B, C, D. It often tells you don't do A, right? Don't do A again. But it doesn't often give you the directions for change. And so, we have to talk about it. You have to tell me what's the issue you're facing, and I have to tell you what I know of the history. And then we have to unpack that together. It's a process, right? And I think embedding our history into our institutions, into our businesses, that is something that is new, and it's a new concept and a new idea. And so it is going to take people really like working together to make that happen. So we'll have to have lots of conversations, but I think we can figure it out is what I'm excited about.
Thank you, Kacie. I know that Linda, you had your hand up. Do you have a question? Still have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you, Kacie. I saw the I saw the exhibit. Fantastic. And I guess the comment I was going to make was that I went in thinking I was going to be like hopeful afterwards, and to be honest, I was not. Because when I a lot of the things I saw, I felt like a lot of it was still happening today. And so my question was to ask you, where is the hope point for you? But I think you just answered that by saying that, it's having people think differently, at different levels within the university. But so I really appreciate this work and the work that you're doing after it, because often sometimes we put this as an exhibit, everybody sees it and we say, oh, but it sounds like there's more work being done after it. So I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Yeah. And I
Thank you.
also add, I think the most hopeful part always for me was that like students in particular, but that the university changes. It does change. It's not always open to change. It's not always knows how it needs to change, but that change has happened and that students have really been, I think, at the center of it. But I'm also hopeful that we even did the project, right? Because even if, let's say, the public history project really does end, which I do think there's a very strong chance it continues, but if it really does end, this is all still there. This is all still out there. This history is accessible in a way that it wasn't before. So I always try and find hope. I tell people a lot, my favorite quote, it's a quote that's on my computer and it's at my house, is "Hope is a discipline" by Miriam Kaba. So you have to like practice hope too. So I'm not always hopeful about this university or about the world, but I try to practice being hopeful.
Oh, that is so powerful. Thank you, Kacie. And thank you, Linda. I think that what you mentioned is really, really important. That's kind of the feeling. At the same time, you learn things, as Kacie mentioned. I know that there are units that are saying, our team is going to visit the exhibit because we want to make changes in the diversity, equity, and inclusion, or the conversations that we're having. And one of them is actually connected to enrollment management. So to me, that means a lot, right? Those that are going out to reach out to families and students to come to the university, I think it is really thoughtful that they're actually practicing that conversation with the exhibit. So Antonia, I just want to make sure that we have time for you.
Hi, Nina for short. Kacie, I just want to thank you for Missy and I went to the exhibit a couple days ago, and I personally, I guess, I went to undergrad for the first 2 years at UW-Madison in the 90s. And at that time, the whole fishing rights up north was really, there was a lot of animosity at that time. And then I'm now in graduate school. So I have the, kind of the student level, and then just seeing that, it was just eye-opening. Definitely no fillers or fluff in the wording. So I thank you for that. For example, on the part where it talked about De Jope 4 Lakes, the land was taken from the indigenous people. So it wasn't, nothing, no fluff. It was just very direct. So I really like that part of it. For the Native American part of it, my question is the research. I mean, is there additional information that we could look at? I mean, who did you talk to? Who were your contact on the Native American aspect of it?
Yeah, so we worked a lot with people on campus who had already done the research. This was like kind of I think an interesting part of public history, but a difficult part is that, our first thing is always what's already been done and how can we promote the research that's already been done, right? Because there's so many great academic historians who do all this work, right? And like sociologists and ethnographers, how do we use their work that's already out there, right? Like don't reinvent the wheel. And this was one where we got a lot of questions to dig deeper. People were like, we think you should do a parcel by parcel accounting of how we got the land. So we looked into it. We looked into how we could do that as a project. And what we found out was that it was going to take about 5 to 7 years, and it was going to cost upwards of $200,000 was the estimate the high estimate. So not super expensive, but time consuming for our project. So we kind of took a step back and said, all right, what is the story that we want to tell here? The story is really clear. The university is built on land that is not ours. That land was not asked for nicely. It was taken forcibly, but the Ho-Chunk people are still here. And so we worked with a couple different professors in history and in American Indian Studies. And I always try and make it easy on folks. So we drafted everything and then sent it out. and then got feedback on it. Because I never want to come to people and say, will you write this exhibit for me? But instead I want your feedback. And so we worked with like 12 different kind of Indigenous people in like a small committee, essentially, that was like, are we telling this the right way? And are we saying it intense enough? Like, are we being as honest as we can be? Because we actually were very lucky. Leadership was not allowed to tell us what we could not write. So they did not see the wording in the exhibit prior to opening day. So we could truly write whatever we wanted. We were beholden to a steering committee made up of faculty, staff, and students. We obviously had a fact checker, things like that. But we did not have to take a university line on these histories. We got to be really clear. And so a lot of the things that you see in there came from community. One of the other sentences that I'm really, really proud about is that we got to bring in Native boarding schools and talk very intentionally that children were stolen, that they were taken from their families, and just really talk about the violence of that at the same time that our students were doing these mock Indigenous ceremonies on campus. So we worked with a bunch of different people, and I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. These are the people to this little small committee was also the ones who told us, you should use this Charles Brown Atlas map. This has to be in here, and the seal has to be in here. And so the territorial seal, we blew that up as big as acrylic as they would sell to us, which is 60 inches. So it's a 60-inch sphere. And I actually think it makes the seal an object in and of itself. And you see it in a way you've never seen it before, because you always see it flat or on like a PowerPoint screen. You never get to really like engage with it. So yes, that's how we did it. And we wanted to be just really honest. I'm glad you picked up on that. We didn't want to slice it or dice it. We wanted to just be very clear.
Definitely. And then Clint Smith, I did attend his, so that just added to, you know, kind of gave me from the perspective you were talking about reckoning, and then just kind of seeing it from, yeah, it just everything tied in. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know we're coming at time, actually 5. Oh my gosh. And we have so much to, you know, talk and questions, but I wonder if we can hopefully have another opportunity maybe later on, as we, many of us have the opportunity to visit the exhibit. Maybe that's what we can kind of think about, you know, how to visit, how to reconnect. If there are specific questions, please let me know. I can certainly connect with Kacie and see what else we can do. I think it is really powerful every time. I feel like that idea of the being hopeful and then really impacts the information that we're sharing is very impactful. And sometimes it really goes directly to my heart and other places that it is really difficult to put the two together, right? As you are representing that specific university or the people in the state. So that's a lot to really deal with. Last thoughts, so we can go and close today's meeting.